sustainability theme. The title of the session is Sustainability and Practices for Intralogistics. Helming this panel is Stephanie Krishnan, who's the Associate Vice President at IDC Manufacturing and Energy Insights. Stephanie is also a fellow organising committee member at LogiSYM, so good to see Stephanie on stage for the first time today. And Stephanie, it's all yours. You think away. I assume you'll be introducing your panel. Do you need some mics?
Yeah, I think we need some microphones. All right, thank you and welcome everybody. Today we're going to continue the discussion about sustainability and practice for intralogistics. And while this is focused largely on intralogistics, it will stray a little bit into the supply chain as
it's on some of the tables. I put it out there everywhere. I just tossed them on every table.
All right, and Marcus?
My name is Marcus Lemaster. I am the Global Director for Logistics Sustainability at Schneider Electric. I don't know how many people know Schneider, but we are a 30 billion euro company in energy management and industrial automation. And we're consistently ranked one of the world's most sustainable companies, and we're in 2021 Corporate Knights most sustainable company in the world. So sustainability permeates everything we do in the products, services, we provide to our customers, as well as how we do our own internal operations.
Great, so we have three gentlemen that seem to know what they're talking about, which is always a good start for a panel. All right, fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen. And just to start, we're talking sustainability. So perhaps if we could define what we mean when we say sustainability and how does it relate to logistics and supply chain? Yeah, maybe we can start with you, Tim.
Oh yeah. Yeah, sustainability for me is really talking about how we can make sure we don't have an irreparable impact on the natural environment. And that is starting with the original inputs through manufacturing, through to packaging. So, how we're packaging our material, how we're doing all that, as well as delivery. And as pointed out previously, the end of life cycle. Because, we're having a lot of these topics of, things floating around, especially our island, and because the end of life is just simply not considered for a lot of products out there. And to me, that's what sustainability is all about. And we do have a serious problem with climate change right now. And so, we need to really start working hard on this topic.
Great. And Marcus, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just add a little bit. Sustainability is one of those very broad terms and covers a lot of areas. Tim's touched on quite a few. It spans all the activities. If you look across at the UN Sustainable Development Goals that are out there, climate, resource, trust, equity, equality. It's not just about the CO2. It's just not about the decarbonization. And then within Schneider, we've actually made commitments around 17 of these different pillars on the site. I just also want to mention, he mentioned a few things on the sustainable packaging, those things. In Schneider, we have set our targets and goals based on an end-to-end value chain. So literally our targets are to say from the mine to the customer, we want to be net zero in our operations by 2050. So what this means when we look at our initiatives and stuff and how sustainability spans, it's going into our tier 1, tier 2, tier N suppliers, because we need to ensure that the iron ore coming out of the ground is net zero, processed in net zero refineries into the metal sheets that then go into our cabinets that then we use to go to our customers. We're looking at the entire span. So when we think about sustainability, it's all those things Tim mentioned. It's biodiversity, it's packaging, it's trucking. In our case, it's very significant on the procurement and the sourcing side of things. So it's very broad. And in Schneider, our supply chain organization, all the SCORE model fits inside it. So from the plan, source, make, deliver, return. That is our supply chain organization. So it's very critical to what we do.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're talking scope 3 emissions or scope 3.
Well, we're talking all the emissions going from upstream scope 3 into internal operations scope 1, 2, into we're even measuring the downstream induced CO2 of the products we sell to our customers. So downstream scope 3 as our customers as well.
Yeah, so when we're talking, for those that are not familiar with the term, scope 1 emissions are those that are derived directly from directly company-owned and controlled resources. Scope 2 emissions are the direct emissions from the generation of purchased energy, so those that come from utilities companies. And your scope 3 are those emissions that are in your value chain. So just a quick definitions, just so that we're all talking the same language. Then, so what challenges are organisations experiencing with regarding to sustainability, right? Specifically for logistics and the supply chain, what's driving the need to do this, and what capabilities are organisations building to reduce their impact? Perhaps if we could start with Fendi. You know, you're seeing a lot of...
Yeah, thank you. All right. Sustainability aspects of, most of the audience here is really logistics and supply chain. I would think it's really about your carbon footprint. As you go about your operations in logistics, right? Carbon footprint covers areas like carbon emission, right? As you transport goods and services, you will have some carbon footprint there. And also in the packaging of materials, about how you do the logistics, right? That will be one part. And another part will really be about air pollution, right? As you transport, from across land, across sea, or even through air, right? There will be some effects there. So I think these would be the key material sustainability areas that potentially we can do more to make a difference. Just to share a little bit for us, right, because we are in the power generating business, the UN Sustainable Development Goals that Marcus shared earlier, we are committed to do our part for 2 areas, right, which is clean and affordable energy, and the other one is really about climate change, because there are the areas that are really material to our business. Yeah.
All right, and Marcus, if these are the areas that are being challenging organisations, then why are you looking at it now? Like, is it something that's intrinsic to your organisation, or are you being requested this from customers, or?
Schneider is actually, has been setting targets and has been involved in the whole sustainability space 15 years, I believe now, with very strong targets having been set since 2010. We've been tracking our internal CO2 and measuring against it from 2012, at least I know, in the transport side of things. It is part of our vision, our mission statement, and what we do out there. Essentially, we're there to bring efficient and sustainable energy to all, is essentially our mission statement. And we live it both internally and with what we deliver to our customers. So it's very ingrained on what we do. So it's the culture of the organization. So it's considered in every decision we make. I did want to mention a couple of the challenges on this. We're all in the logistics space. We're all moving stuff these days. One thing the challenge is, in my role, I own transport decarbonization for Schneider Electric, or our strategy around how to do it. One of the biggest challenges right now is the supply chain, or the logistics challenges we have today, with all the shipping delays, the inconsistencies, the capacity issues, these types of things. Within our operations, especially in the transport, if you fly things, any targets you're trying to hit just go out the window, from experience here. So as we move down this path and moving forward, one of the challenges we're facing is, in these critical situations, is keeping the eye on the sustainability targets at the same time as you're trying to do your service recovery or keep your supply chain moving. Because there are ways to do it. You have to start getting novel and thinking about different ways. I think there was some mentions before about multimodal, so fly partway, ocean partway, rather than fly the whole way. There's unique solutions to do that. So that's one of the big challenges, I would say, in today's operating world, is in a lot of ways, I'm going to say that service piece is not, compatible with some sustainability decarbonization objectives.
Customer requirements and not climate friendly.
Most of the time they are. The last 2 years, not really.
All right, so Tim, did you have anything to add to that?
There are a lot of challenges, Stephanie, as you can imagine. But yes, yeah, I would say, yeah, on two levels. One is Schneider is very fortunate in that they have, let's say, a management that has always been kind of like pulling for this. I think a lot of the challenge that we face, not only in Southeast Asia, I think this is global. People are waiting to be coerced into doing something about their carbon footprint. So there is a lack of urgency. There is this misconception that sustainability is about CSR projects. It is not about, and to your point in the beginning of the lecture, it's about greenwashing. Is it greenwashing? What's the difference between the two? And you see this time and time again. The attitude is, what do we have to do instead of what is needed to be done? There's too few companies out there looking at this as an operational challenge, a societal challenge. And this is, frankly, a huge managerial challenge, which needs to be confronted first. On the transport side, I worked with so many MNCs in the past, and their main challenge, a lot of them have that are trying to do something about it, is simply the supply of a sustainable alternative to the technology that we have today. So SAF fuels, I was just reading this morning in another magazine, you know, in 2020 we had 50,000 tons of sustainable air fuel. But in reality, we need more like 4 million tons. I mean, we need millions and millions of tons. And frankly, that would be very difficult to come up with using vegetable oil. You know, there needs to be a lot more R&D put into this topic and a lot more technology developed to really reach our goals for 2050. Yeah.
We shouldn't give up yet. Fendi,
No, not giving up. Not giving up. We got Fendi over here.
No, yeah, okay. So I just want to, you know, coming from what Marcus and Tim said, right? A lot of times there is this competing agenda or competing targets, right? But I would also like to all of us to think, right? And what I do notice as I talk to some of our logistics customers, right? There is also increasing customer demand for sustainability. Am I right to say that? Some customers actually require and conduct audits on some of our logistics customers to make sure that the practices they do is actually sustainable, right? I think this presents both some cost because you have to make sure that you're sustainable, but also opportunities, right? To differentiate yourself in the ways that you do things that are more sustainable compared to your peers, for example. And the other one would be some of these complex things that you mentioned, right? It may require some upfront investment, but if you look at the long haul, right, reducing your carbon footprint, right, through planning your better routes to some automation, it will also translate to savings, right, in your cost of operations potentially. So I guess just want to ask everyone to look in a bigger and a longer term perspective.
Which kind of segues nicely into my next thought, which is about, you know, how do we separate leaders from laggards in this? And it sounds like one of the ways that leaders stand out from laggards in sustainability is that leaders are starting to create a point of competitive differentiation about this. I know that with some of our clients, and I have one in the room, but I won't name them, but they are using it as a way to protect their profitability, which is great, you know, and I think that is a way that we need to look at it. It's not just a point of cost, it's a point of protecting our own capabilities and our own price points in the market as well. In terms of other ways that organizations that are you know, leaders in the space, what differentiates them from laggards? And perhaps, you know, Fendi, if I can come back to you with that, you talked about, you know, investing for the future, which is obviously going to be one way. Is there any others?
Yeah, so I guess the long and short of it is really, if you want to be a leader, you need to do something, right? You need to do something instead of just being tossed around or being forced by policies into doing something. And one way you do that is really to understand where your carbon footprint really is, right? To understand and set a baseline, to understand the best practices that are currently being used in the industry, in the sector that you are in, and how you can improve, right, some of these things that you are currently doing. Set a target, set a time frame that is reasonable, and work towards that, right? Set action plans to get to where you want to be in your sustainability goals. Maybe I'll start with that.
Okay, I'll pick up with that. I would add on, I agree with everything Benny said there. If you look at the organization successful, and I look at Schneider on where we is, it's really starting at the top and actually having a strategy and a commitment and targets and goals to shoot for. So actually being able to assess where you are, determining where you want to get to, and getting a plan in place. And I think the important thing to remember here is you don't have to get it right away. You can start doing things today before the plan's in place. But if you look at what the leaders are doing out there, they're the ones that have the target and the plan in place. The second thing I would sit and say is, and within Schneider, it's quite extensive, is to have proper programs and projects around these different types of initiatives and whichever pillars you choose to, whether it's decarbonization, it's biodiversity or stuff, where you're actually tracking and have leaders responsible for this to report in to make sure you're making progression against it. The thing about sustainability, and I've learned really quickly, is this is a long-term continuous improvement project. You're not going to solve it overnight. We have to wait for technologies to come along, new processes. There's all sorts of things that are getting in the way, but it has to be continuous improvement to continue to make those steps. So I'd say that's what's important. And the third one, to come back to the theme of the conference, is actually digitization ties into this as well. So again, being able to measure, being able to monitor, to be able to do these assessments, even as we drive it down into our customers, that information, having it at your fingertips, being able to process it, being able to make intelligent decisions from it, is really critical. So it's one more reason to digitize on top of all the other reasons to digitize.
Yeah, so having that commitment from leadership, being able to have a roadmap and commit to it as continuous improvement, and digitalize in order to have the data to support the transparency that you need to take this forward. Yeah. And then Tim?
Yeah, I think that last point is really dead on, is that it's referring to the culture of companies that lead in this area. They have established culture with their employees, all of them, of continuous improvement. And that should be a no-brainer for logistics people like us, because we should be all about continuous improvement, right? So, but that is not necessarily a discipline that others in the company may share, right? So, yeah, that's harking back to the challenge, but anticipating and acting on those anticipated challenges is something that good organizations tend to do. Yeah, and that's why they're out ahead of this topic.
And I'm just bringing this back to a point that we had, a discussion that we had when we were talking about this panel is, leaders are doing two things that actually attract talent. They're doing something about sustainability, and they're doing something about digitalization, so that when your employees rock up, it's not 1994 in the workplace, right? And I think these two are things that actually help with recruitment and making sure that you have good talent, right? Is this something that you've experienced?
Yeah, I can comment on that one. We actually have, Schneider is a very, it recognizes the best employer, and we have a very, very engaged workforce. The younger generation coming in actually want to work for Schneider, and a lot of it has to do with the sustainability and our commitment to it. I'll give one example. I mean, we had to laugh the other day. We do quarterly open line sessions that we open up, and we do one on sustainability about once a quarter. And the last one, we were quite shocked as the attendees in this half of the world. We run two sessions, one for each half of the world. In this half of the world, went from 800 to 900 to 1,000 to 1,100 to 1,200 joining us. Our chief supply chain officer's last open line only had 900 people attend. So we got a good kick out of that people are engaged and these things are getting very, very well received and attended.
So sustainability, bringing sexy back to the supply chain.
Yeah. Why not?
All right, why not? All right, so sustainability, as we talked about, if we're talking intra, we're looking at scope 1, but as we've already gone way beyond intralogistics, so sorry, Bob. But we do need to work with partners to make this happen, right? You know, how are you working with partners to encourage sustainable investment? Are you able to get that critical mass across the supply chain to, you know, have a real impact? And how are you doing this? And does it have an impact from a planning and profit perspective? Yeah.
I can start with this one. There's quite a few areas on this one. The partnership and collaboration is of utmost importance. I mentioned to you our entire end-to-end vision that we have. You know, one of our main initiatives we have right now, being run out of our procurement side of things, is we're actually engaging our top 1,000 suppliers into our organization. I don't think I mentioned, most of our CO2 impact inside our company on the upstream scope 3 is actually from the components coming in from our suppliers. So as we have to look to decarbonize. So we are engaging with our top 1,000 suppliers globally to start decarbonizing their operations, you know, towards the targets that we've set. And in some cases, there's already programs there and it's just integrating with them and working well. In other cases, we're actually going in and helping the companies define targets, helping them estimate and measure their CO2, and helping them put programs together. So we're seeing this as a major partnership that we're doing as one of our main initiatives that's underway at the moment. On the other side of it, again, coming back over to transport and bringing it back into logistics, we met with our top 12 partners globally. We've talked to them about sustainability very specifically and the challenges on it and where we want to get. One thing to note, I'll just share this piece of information. We hear about EVs, we hear about hydrogen trucks, we hear about all these technologies. Realistically, diesel fuel or fossil fuels are going to be with us for the next decade, especially in the mid to long haul. There's technology needs to catch up. Yes, there's sustainable aviation fuels. Yes, there's biofuels, but as Tim alluded to, the supply is not there yet. So for the next 10 years, in addition to working on the new technologies and porting across to EV and hydrogen, it's absolutely critical to focus on efficiency as well. So squeeze everything you can into that container. Put everything on the lowest carbon mode you possibly can. Work with your carriers to make an investment in more fuel efficient assets and vehicles. Even if they're diesel, going from a Euro 5 to a Euro 6 to, I don't even know if they're the Euro 7 class of vehicle, brings that fuel economy up and does it. So remember, it's a focus on the technology and on the efficiency side that's important. And then the last thing on collaboration, just to mention, is also, you know, just as we're doing, they've been talking about the Shippers Council, you know, we're doing one on sustainability tomorrow, collaborating and looking within the industry, so with other shippers, how might we work together, you know, to drive those efficiencies? I'll give one example. We've had some discussions in Singapore. We're talking to some other shippers. You know, we're opening our new distribution center in Tuas, near the new port. The airport is about as far away as you possibly can in Singapore. So we're having a discussion saying, is there anybody else over there where we could start doing, you know, milk runs or shuttles, doing airport runs on a schedule? And then if we do that, would it be possible to then electrify that vehicle rather than using diesel? So take vehicles off the road and then electrify them. And then what's the infrastructure required to do that? Because one thing I think that's critical in transport is we talk about EVs, electric vehicles, and those, but the critical component to drive that is the underlying infrastructure. You need it. You need a charge point, and you need a power grid that can support that, and you need the renewable energies coming into that power ground if you want to make it green end to end. So,
just take a pause here. Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah, we've got one in there. Have we got a microphone? 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 Thank you, gents. All right. You just introduce yourself, so that'd be great. A working microphone? Testing, testing. Gotcha.
Hi, my name is Erica Gilchrist, and this question is more towards Tim. I believe you do consultancy. We talk about competing targets, and in the larger organizations, they'll look at it and say, let's throw some solar panels on the roof, and let's create a building management system to manage our cool stores and call it good. But then you get into managing the supply chain, you talk about reducing your air freight, trying to get into multimodal, therefore increasing your inventory turn costs at times. How do you deal specifically with the CFOs and organizations where they'll say, yeah, we're working towards these targets, we put our solar panels up, et cetera, but they're banging on us constantly to keep our inventory costs low and transport costs low, and it ends up pulling away from the whole green sustainability piece and just getting back to moving freight again.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because we actually the toughest discussions I've dealt with is actually with operations teams, which are very knowledgeable about like, hey, you're pulling this away, what about that way? Oddly enough, yeah, at CFO level, they're just kind of waiting for it to be sorted. Yeah, but but that said, no, there's some real challenges, because like, it always, there's also the competing customer term. Sometimes we ask one of the clients, hey, can you go multimodal more? Can you put it on a rail? Come on, this thing can go on a rail. Oh, we just don't have if we do that, we get yelled at because the customers don't get things on time. And because the rail system, unfortunately, where that was happening, is just not consistent enough. Our logistics network was not appropriate enough to meet demand. And that is a real tough, ultimately they have to do what they need to do to survive in the market. And even, concepts like, putting the warehouse, floating warehouse. Why do you need a warehouse? Just put it on the boat, just start sail it around, and just try and use all this digitization stuff we've got to organize it in such a way that you can deliver off where you need to deliver off when it needs to be delivered off. And on a lot of levels, it's not there. People say, I don't want to invest in that. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. It's almost easier to have discussions about where can I get the EV trucks, because I can't find any. Then it becomes more like a planning issue or a planning topic, or, they have to argue about, life of operations cost, and, you have to be challenged more on the figures that way, because they don't want to put an upfront expense to get the expensive EV, but, over 5 or 7 years, it's going to pay for itself, and, it's just an investment,
It becomes an easy win.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus the more robust solutions that allow us to ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marcus, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just have one comment. For being a sustainably mature or mature sustainably, whichever way that wording goes, as a company, we still have this same issue in the organization, because we do have our productivity targets and we have our sustainability objectives on the two sides. And as I said, the last couple of years, they've come in some conflict. But what I would say is, again, because this comes from the top down, from the board, it sits at the exec comm. In fact, 25% of the corporate part of our bonus every year is based on hitting our sustainability targets. So it sits right there inside the metrics of the company. And the CFO and the finance, they're actually working through the models right now to figure out how we balance these things. The one challenge that really at the CFO's level is, how do you put a cost on this? Because cost of carbon, we haven't found a right answer, and no matter how we priced it, whether it's $200, $300, or $400 a ton, it still doesn't make a difference, from a piece. So what I would say is, so it has to be sitting at that level, so it's at mind of the CFO, and brings it down. But yeah, even within our organization, we have that push and shove every day.
It's good to know that it exists all over. Thanks.
Obviously it's go for the low-hanging fruit, but then after that, then you need to start looking at being sophisticated. We're seeing organisations use things like RPA and some of these sort of capabilities to try and improve the efficiency. And once you're able to show that the dollars are paying off from that perspective, not just only in terms of sustainability outcomes, but also in certain terms of productivity outcomes, then you start to get attention, right? So having that balance, I think, and we found in the surveys that we do at IDC that organisations are prioritising, there is the energy and water reduction because that saves money, but then it starts to go into efficiency and optimisation because, again, it has an impact on the bottom line. So they tend to be the first priorities. Then after that, it goes into product design and circular economy because that tends to be looking after your long-term growth, product protection, which is where we're starting to see organisations start to prioritise these types of products and services. Then it becomes how do you weigh the loss of sale? Because if you don't do this and you're not ticking that box on the RFQs, then it's getting to a point where it's going from this is a recommendation to this is a requirement and a mandate. And if you start failing to tick that box, that's where it's going to end up.
Yeah, I was going to say, just one last comment on this is, these last 2 years have really thrown things. The nice thing prior to pre-COVID was that if you think about the productivity and the sustainability, at least in transport, your cheaper mode of transport is also your most sustainable. So up until we hit this world of crisis, the two of them nicely lined up, and when you got your productivity and your cost savings down, most of the times it led to a reduction in your CO2 footprint as well. But times have changed to the new normal, so.
Yeah, the next normal. But if we put CO2 emissions in there, and I'm just going to skip to the one where about addressing emissions, carbon offsets can sometimes be a tricky conversation, and some organisations view this as cheating, almost. What is carbon offsetting, and is this greenwashing, and what about RECs? Bendy, you mentioned RECs before. Is it different? And what is the benefit of purchasing an REC, a renewable energy certificate? I'll let Bendy, you start with that.
Right. I'll start, and then I'll pass it to panels. All right. So I really wouldn't say that carbon offsets or RECs are just greenwashing. Whether or not a company or a corporate is doing greenwashing would really depend on the corporate itself. Whether it has a very clear target, right? What kind of energy attribute certificates or EACs are they buying, right? Whether carbon offsets or RECs. What is the origins, right? The origins of it is very much important, and how much is it applicable in the country where the company operates, right? And then whether the company is truly focused, right, on reducing its carbon footprint, right? Then you will be able to tell whether you're just simply greenwashing or you're truly committed to doing things in a more sustainable manner. You can't really say that you're buying carbon offsets means you are greenwashing. And then the difference between carbon offsets and RECs, I think you'll find that these terms keep coming up, right? Especially when you're buying energy. They're actually different, and they are meant for different purposes. Okay, I'll start with carbon offsets. So carbon offset is meant to offset your scope 1 emissions. So it's measured in tons of CO2. So when you buy carbon offsets, it will be given to you, okay, how much do you emit, right? For example, you measured your operations and you emitted 10,000 tons of carbon last year, for example, right, from your operation. So you will need 10,000 tons of CO2 offsets. Right? So this is really for your scope 1 emission. Whereas REC, which is a short for renewable energy certificates, is really in megawatt hour of green energy produced. Okay, so for every 1 megawatt hour of green energy coming from a renewable energy system, you will get 1 REC. Okay, so it's used to offset your scope 2 emissions, which is your emission from purchasing electricity, which I think most companies, okay, probably for logistics you do have substantial scope 1. But for most of other companies who do not use such logistics, right, for example, data centers, they use a lot of scope 2, meaning they consume a lot of power, right? So they will need REC as a way to offset their footprint, right? So these are the key difference, and a couple more differences, right? One is that for carbon offsets, it comes from a wide range of sources. It can come from reforestation projects, it can come from a biomass boiler project, it can come from renewable energy sources as well. So it comes from multiple types of sources. Of course, there are registries to then make sure that these sources are really qualified and that they are valid as a carbon offset generating projects. Whereas REC, as I mentioned earlier, it only can come from green energy project, right? So from solar, from wind, sometimes from biomass. These are really the source of RECs, not like carbon offset. And last one that I want to say is that RECs are very geography specific, alright? Meaning, if you consume your power in Singapore, ideally you should get RECs from the same grid, and that's from Singapore, right? Although now with the Singapore standards on RECs, they allow purchasing RECs from the region because they recognize the scarcity of it in Singapore context. But mostly it is geographical specifics, and where the consumption happens, you should get RECs from the same grid. Whereas carbon offsets is mostly viewed as a global emission reductions, and buyers are typically more neutral about getting carbon offsets from other locations in the world, right? So yeah, this is just how the market is at the moment. There are registries there, so there are registries to ensure that the carbon offsets that are in the market are really valid and that they are qualified, right? So you take comfort in these registries doing their proper job in qualifying all these projects to make sure that they really generate carbon offsets that can then be marketed and sold to end users, right? Likewise for RECs, there are TICAs, there are IRECs. These are all the registries that actually accumulate, right? They qualify your project and then register your RECs that can then be traded in the market. Yeah, maybe
and certainly, again, the RECs, you talk about data centers, but also cold warehouses, surely that certainly is applicable there. Marcus, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to add, at Schneider, we, in general principle, we don't do offsets. The main reason is it really ties to what your strategy is. We actually want the initiatives we take to actually be removing CO2 from the environment. So we want to demonstrate an actual removal rather than trading, let's say, offsets or in the sense of trading credits on the side. And I just wanted to mention, to add on what Fendi said there. So again, that comes to what your strategy is and what you want to do. When we look at our Scope 2 emissions, and I'll use, generally when we go electrify our in-house facilities, so I'll use our example, our Geelong office here, which is a net zero building. We generally go in and say, do we have the opportunity to install solar on site ourselves or with a partner to utilize and drive in the building? Second, we then generally look and say, can we get sustainable energy power purchase agreements, which I believe is what we have with Semcor with regards to the energy required in our facilities here. And then the third, I don't know the difference, slight difference to RECs, we actually use energy attribute certificates. There's another one for you, EACs. And really what this is, Schneider is going out and making direct investment into renewable energy generation somewhere in the world. Again, it may not be on the same grid, but we actually go out and we invest in solar farms, or we invest in wind farms, or we invest in biogas injection points to then get these energy certificates to apply. So again, there's many ways to do this in terms, but again, it comes to really what is the strategy that you have inside your organization.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to do the quick fire round, all right? Right, so if you were going to give like 2 or 3 key pieces of advice on how to get started or accelerate your sustainable journey, what would it be? And so quick fire round is like, 3 really short bullet points. So let's start with you, Tim.
Okay. Number 1, you need to measure what the heck is going on. So many companies don't even understand what their emissions are, and they don't have any capability to measure it on a constant basis. So this is the biggest problem with what I see in the transport industry, at least anywhere, almost anywhere. 2, get all the staff involved when you want to really start working on this problem, because the young people today, they're going to have a lot of solutions. And so all the staff can be involved. And 3rd, Third one is, well, do what you're doing now. Stay involved with your logistics community. You know, we have this great magazine, but not only that, you meet so many good colleagues. And, you know, I've always found this to be the topic that, you know, even though, you know, you might have Kuehne+Nagel and DHL, and they're going to share about what their projects are and how they improve on this topic, you know. So everybody realizes that this is a societal battle that we need to win.
Yeah.
And it could be multi-generational, but people are willing to help each other.
Yeah. But I think it's really getting the pointy end of the stick right now. Marcus, quick fire.
Quick, first one, exactly what we're doing today. The first one I would say is educate yourself on the sustainability space. There's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of technology. It's a massively evolving space. So read up on it, educate yourself, understand it. The second one is, you know, ensure that you understand what the goals or what it is you're targeting, and just get started. So, you know, if you don't have the big ones, you know, get started. Choose the best mode. Optimize your route. Reuse your packing boxes. Find something simple to start with, because it'll make all the difference. And the third one is around the collaboration. Look for opportunities, partners with your suppliers, with your fellow shippers, with the community, with the government, whatever, you know, to drive these targets forward. It's an ecosystem we're dealing with here, so you need to work with the partners. Nobody can do it in isolation.
Okay, and Fendi.
Alright. First, similar. Basically, you have to measure. You can't improve anything and you don't measure, right? So set a baseline, set a target, and have a time frame of how you can achieve that. And second is to really look at the best practices that are being used in the industry, right, for a specific sector. And you'll be surprised that there are actually a lot of improvements that you can do, right, just from learning from your peers. And third is you don't have to do it alone, right? There are leasing companies, for example ourselves, will be more than happy to speak to you, where we actually bear all the upfront capex for you, and you just sign a long-term power purchase agreement with us, and it's all settled and done for you, right? And not only solar, I'm aware there are also lighting as a service, energy efficiency as a service. So there are really a lot of resources out there that you can tap on, that you do not have to put in capex.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Now, if you want to continue this conversation, 12:30 p.m. tomorrow in the Oriel room, the Shippers Council is going to be having a closed-door shippers discussion on sustainability, which I think has been led by you, Marcus. All right, so if you come tomorrow and join in that discussion to continue the sharing of the understanding, and we hope to see you there. I'll hand it back to Bob before we go to refreshments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, a round of applause for our very